What's up, everyone? George has to sneeze, so excuse us if we cut it out. Welcome back. We're talking about Eternals, Chloe Zhao's MCU debut. It's got a pretty stacked cast. It's a long movie, but we promise we won't take it that much time to talk about this one. Welcome back to the rewatch. George, what do you think? Eternals.
It's quite the intro. My
Thank
need to
you.
sneeze is past, so thank you.
There you go. It's good. See?
Yeah, this one is a long one. It takes a lot of time to set up its characters, set up its story. You got a dozen major players in this one.
Yeah.
10 Eternals plus Erisham and Dane Whitman. And then, you get into everyone else that the Eternals interact with. I think this film's fatal flaw is that it was a movie. And I will explain what I mean by that, because Marvel Studios made the decision that they would introduce television series in Phase 4. We have seen with Moon Knight that an origin story can work as a television series. You don't need to see them have an origins. You don't need to see a character have an origin story in a film. Eternals is, almost, it's over 2.5 hours long, because you have to introduce a dozen major characters this deep into the MCU. And I think as great as a job that Chloe Zhao does with this, I don't know if it's funny to say this, but I don't know if 2 hours 36 minutes was long enough to tell the story that they did, because you could have had, a 12 episode MCU series with 40-minute episodes introducing to each Eternal. Maybe you get one or two an episode, and then you start building the team together, and then you fight the big battle at the end, still telling the same story, but you get much more in shorter bites. And I think the pacing of this one is just what drags it down for me and so many other MCU fans.
So I think you're actually right. And I know our rankings and ratings probably won't reflect that. But that's okay. I think
Well,
you are
my
right that
ranking and rating will reflect that I'm right.
yes. No, I just that I
The split,
meant
yeah.
that we agree that there's a split and that there's a bit of a difference in
I
sort
got
of
you.
our opinions. But I do think that it probably would have been better served as a TV series. Whether that's a 6 or a 9 episode format, which is typically what Marvel has been doing so far, or even 12, bump it up a little bit. I think one of those would have worked, right? Give it more space, a little bit more time to breathe, because it's a massive story, right? It's not like it takes place over the course of 3 years or a couple of months. It's thousands of years. And to get that kind of context and to really flesh out the motivations of the characters, I think you need to have more time. And if this was a 3-hour movie, I don't think it would have been enough time. I mean, there's so much to unpack. I think for being a 2.5 hour movie, it did a pretty solid job of doing that. Obviously, there were pacing issues. It was slow at points, but I think overall, it's a strong entry, and I definitely am someone that likes it more than some other people that I've talked to. I think it's one of the more unique Marvel projects. It really is an epic in ways that some of the other projects aren't. I mean, that's purely based not just on the scale of the project and covering thousands of years, but it sort of brings in all of these legends and tales that you hear about, right? The Epic of Gilgamesh is something that I read in school, and it gets brought in. The Tale of Icarus gets brought in. Athena as sort of the inspiration for Athena in Greece. All of that gets talked about. in this film, sort of as the Eternals being the sort of the focal point of all of these stories. And I think that's really great. You know, the cinematography of this film is a strong point. It's very unique in that sense that they filmed on location a lot and as much as possible, which is something Chloe Zhao does in all of her films. She goes to location and films, and that's something that I know. I forget who it was, but mentioned that he came over and was surprised at how much they were.
It's Kit Harington.
That's right. It was Kit Harington. Thank you. He was surprised at how much they were out of a studio and not in some backlot. And I think that's a great departure from some of the big CGI that we got from Marvel. Not that CGI, I'm against CGI or anything, but it's just a nice change. And it made the film feel a little bit more grounded in the story and the locations.
Yeah, the world building, we talk about the exposition and the pacing. We can talk about that all night. But the world building that Chloe Zhao is able to do with these characters and this story is a heavy lift. And for the most part, pacing issues aside, it's done well. Most of the characters, Kingo, Druig, Fastus, Makari, you know, even Ajak, even though she's, spoiler, not alive for most of the time the movie is happening. These are well-rounded characters for the most part. Icarus is another great example. A lot of depth. Love Richard Madden in this film. That isn't the case with all of the world building or all of the characters. Like, the big question that's asked by Dane Whitman in the first act of the movie is, why didn't these guys help fight Thanos? And, you know, you get the explanation they were instructed not to interfere unless deviants were involved. Well, in the comics, Thanos has the deviant gene, for whatever that's worth. But it's such a major, it's such a group of major players in the universe, with Arishem essentially being your god figure, your metaphor or allegory, what have you, for an all-powerful being or entity.
Yeah.
And to have that kind of power show up at this point is questionable for the greater timeline of the MCU. And we've talked about with films like, I don't know, the one we keep coming back to is Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 with self-contained stories. This one is largely self-contained in the world that it builds. But like I've said for Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 on several occasions, that's not really what I'm looking for in an MCU project. I like the Easter eggs. I like the connections. You know, bringing in some of my favorite actors like Kumail Nanjiani or Angelina Jolie or Richard Madden or Kit Harington will only take you so far when I'm viewing the film. So it's one that I really, really liked on my first viewing, just because, like we talked about with Shang-Chi yesterday, it was really fresh. The visuals are great. The musical score by Ramin Djawadi is outstanding. One of the best in the MCU. Chloe Zhao's direction, the practical locations. It has a lot of positives. But again, I keep coming back to the issues that I have with the film, and I can't reconcile telling this story in this format.
No, totally fair. You know, I think while there's some things to be desired, and I think the pacing is one where if it got split up, I think this would be a fantastic project as a TV show.
Oh yeah, 100%.
I mean, this would be great as a TV show. but yeah, they made the decision. We have to live with it now, but overall, pretty strong project. A lot of fun. As we said, unique. So I think let's jump into some rankings and ratings.
Yeah. You guys could probably guess that this is going to be towards the bottom of mine. Not that far, not that close to the bottom in my MCU ranking. I'm going to put it 24th out of the 32 projects that we've seen or that we will have seen by the time we wrap this up. But, it's good enough not to be awful, but it's not good enough to be great. And I think that's pretty much the bottom line of where I fall on this. And I think my 0 to 100 score, which is a 73, is pretty reflective of that. I have a lot that I like about this movie. I have a lot that I can't really get behind. Mixed bag is the bottom line.
Yeah, totally fair.
Thank you for making me feel that my feelings are valid.
Yeah, you're welcome. So valid, George.
All right, go on.
It's also going to be in the sort of the bottom half of projects for me, but it's near the top of the second half. I'm going to put it at 18 out of 32. I think it is a strong film, and obviously laid out some of my issues with it, but I think it's better than enough of the films to put it there, or enough of the projects. And I'm going to give it a low B. It'll be B minus, giving it an 82 out of 100, for the same reasons. This one, I think will probably stay the same, around the same. If anything, it'll go down as more projects get introduced and sort of push everything. But we shared our thoughts. We'd love to know yours. So hit us up in the comments, like and subscribe to the channel, do all that good stuff for us. And we'll see you tomorrow. We're talking about Hawkeye. So a great project, a lot of fun.
Great project, a lot of fun.
Yeah.
And I didn't sneeze.
No, he didn't.
I didn't sneeze. I got you.
My prediction was off, but that's okay. I'm wrong about a lot of things.
I was instructed not to sneeze unless deviants were involved.
There you go.
The ending to yesterday's episode was so much better. I'm sorry I ruined it.
You're good. All right.
All right.
Well, we'll see you tomorrow night for Hawkeye. Good night.
Good night.